Let me start with a question, not a claim. What if God isn't understood as power at a distance, but as presence up close? Many people don't reject God because they oppose goodness or truth. They reject an image of God that feels cold, demanding, or coercive. A God who rules by fear, a God who insists on certainty, a God who stays safely untouched by human pain. But what if that image is wrong? What if God is revealed not through domination, but through love that risks being wounded? Not through force, but through patience and nearness. This kind of God wouldn't compel belief. He wouldn't crush doubt. He would invite trust. And if that were true, the question wouldn't be whether we can believe perfectly, but whether we are willing to become more human through love. If you've ever thought the idea of an all powerful creator sounds unlikely or unnecessary, hey, I get it. For most of my life, I didn't believe in God either. Not because of rebellion or trauma or anything dramatic. It just never seemed like something real to me. And I'm not here to preach or twist your arm. God's existence is not provable or unprovable. If God exists, he must be outside the universe he created. In my 77 years on this planet, I have come to the conclusion that we don't get certainty in this life, and maybe that's okay. All I can do is share how I went from seeing God as totally implausible to realizing reality is far stranger than pure materialism suggests, to finally believing that God is real and deeply loves his creation, including us. So let's rewind the tape and start at the beginning. I grew up with zero reasons to believe. For the first 20 years of my life, I simply wasn't it just simply wasn't part of the story. My family never went to church and I never spent time thinking about spiritual questions. I was busy making my way, having fun, and living life. My first brush with anything spiritual happened because of the woman who eventually became my wife of 56 plus years. She went to church, so I tagged along, not to find faith, just to sit next to her. The conversations were interesting, but that's all they were: ideas, concepts, nothing that tugged at me or demanded belief. Vietnam was my first real oh God moment. A year before our wedding, I shipped off to Vietnam. One night under enemy fire, something surprising happened. I prayed. Not because I'd suddenly become a believer, but because when you hit a moment of absolute extremity, prayer is instinctive, built in human. But instinct isn't evidence. So when I made it home and headed off to college, I walked right back into skepticism. Science reinforced my atheism, at least at first. As an electrical engineering major, dove headfirst into physics, math, and logic. For some people, science opens the door to spirituality. For me, it slammed it shut. I wrestled with the idea of God for a year. Then one night, I admitted it to myself plainly. I just can't uh, make myself believe in an all powerful being out there. And that was that. I became an atheist and stayed one for the next 25 years. My wife and kids went to church. I wasn't against it. I told them honestly, I'm glad it means something to you. I just don't see it. And then a shift I didn't expect. Years later, after the kids were grown, my wife got involved in a network marketing group. They held weekend seminars, and at the end of one, a minister gave an altar call. You know, the walk forward and become a new person moment. I went forward out of curiosity, maybe a little defiance, definitely with zero expectations. And then something happened, something emotional, something unexplainable. Not fear, not pressure, not doctrine, something deep inside me cracked open. I started reading the Bible. I started going to church. Life felt different, better. For about 20 years, belief brought me comfort, but it didn't erase all my doubts, especially when I ran into Old Testament passages that didn't seem to fit science or morality. After retirement, I finally faced my doubts. With time on my hands, I decided to stop avoiding my questions. I explored the philosophical arguments in cosmology, fine tuning, design, morality, spiritual experiences. I read books arguing the Bible was literally dictated by God. I spent years trying to make every verse line up with science. But the harder I pushed, the less sense that approach made. But together they nudged me toward a realization that maybe dismissing the spirituality entirely was too simple. So I took a step back. Instead of forcing the Bible to fit science, I took a fresh look at science itself. And that's where everything shifted. Quantum physics really got really weird. MIT puts their physics courses online for free, and I left a link below. And I started learning some of the basic concepts of quantum mechanics. That struck me, what struck me is at the fundamental levels of reality, things are made of fields and forces, which are not material. I also learned things like light experiences no passage of time, electrons behave as if they were in multiple places at the same time. Information seems woven into the structure of reality. The universe may have more dimensions than we perceive. No one truly understands why reality behaves like this. And one day it hit me. God didn't seem any more far-fetched than the universe we live in. Quantum physics didn't convince me of God, but it gave me the possibility of a non-material God. And then the Shroud of Turin entered the picture. The shroud is the artifact that just refuses to go away. I heard of the shroud back in the 1980s while I was still an atheist, and the carbon-14 testing that they did on it dated the dated the shroud to 1300s, and they declared it was a medieval forgery. Like most people, then I assumed they were correct. But in 2017, when C14 data was released and found to be questionable, in 2018, a preserved sample used for the carbon dating in the 1980s was shown to be part of a patch and not and and not the same as the image that was on the cloth. Recent testing has put the date of the shroud into the first century. So I decided to take another look. And what grabbed me is the image is a photographic negative on a linen cloth, centuries before photography had existed. It contained 3D information more like a scan than a painting. There are no pigments, no brush strokes, just a faint discoloration on the outer fibers of the cloth. The wounds match Roman crucifixion practices in detail and match accounts described in the Bible. No known process explains how the image was made. The high energy light is the closest analogy they have. So after years of research, I left some of the links below if you're interested. My personal conclusion is simple. I believe the shroud is authentic burial cloth of Jesus, which raises the big question. If that's true, what does it mean? If the shroud is real, then wow, the implications are enormous. Just imagine the shroud is exactly what it appears to be, a physical imprint of whatever happened when Jesus was being resurrected. Then three things stand out. One, God didn't leave us only stories, the Bible, and the natural world he created. He left something physical, something we can examine, study, and test. Two, it seems tailor-made for the modern world, a world obsessed with evidence, imaging, and analysis. 3, it suggests God anticipated our doubts and met us right where we are. But the biggest message is love. If God left the shroud intentionally, here's what I think it says. 1, God understands our doubt. He's not forcing belief. He left a puzzle, something to explore and wrestle with. 2, Christianity appears to be true. God chose to willingly share in human suffering. The image isn't of a triumphant Superman, it's a tortured, broken man. If that man is Jesus, then God didn't stay distant. He stepped into our pain, our fear, our violence. What kind of love is that? 3, God didn't want us to feel alone. The message almost feels like, I was here. I know your fear. I suffered like you suffered. And I left a trace so you'd know you're not alone. And 4, love might be the actual structure of reality. If the Creator willingly experienced pain for humanity, then love isn't a soft emotion. It's the deepest logic behind existence. Final thoughts, not final answers. I don't expect skeptics to be convinced. Honest doubt is healthy. But here's where I've landed. The shroud, which I personally find deeply compelling, doesn't point to a tyrant demanding obedience. It looks more like evidence of someone who stepped into our suffering, allowed himself to be hurt, chose compassion over force, left a message for a modern skeptical world, and did it not to win arguments, but to reassure us. If the shroud is real, then God's love isn't distant or abstract. It's human, it's wounded, it's near, and it's beautiful. This is the God I have come to believe in. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are in your own search and questioning, I hope you keep going. My goal in this channel is to discuss questions I had as an atheist. In my next podcast, I'll be discussing why an all-powerful God would allow pain and suffering.